Hello, America, and welcome to Of the People. My name's Robert Chernin with the American Center for Education and Knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us for yet another podcast. At ACEK, we do believe America is exceptional among the nations of the world. And we believe we're the last best hope for people who will only live in a society that's free. You know, what makes America exceptional is really three things. It's pretty simple. Most basic are the individual liberties that we enjoy and are supposed to be guaranteed by our Constitution. We call those the Bill of Rights, at least the first 10 of them, right? The second is the shared responsibility or code of personal responsibility that we all share and that we're all supposed to buy into. And the third, and perhaps most important of them all, is that the consent of the governed is required for government to function. In other words, they need our permission. That's really that simple. Our goal here is to provide you with unvarnished and unfiltered information for you to make your own decisions, but also for you to stand up and speak up for what you believe in and the kind of country you want to live in and you want your children to live in. It's just that simple. It's the very core of who we are, and it's the foundation upon which this country was established. For this episode of The People, where do we start? Well, let the book burning begin. We warned everybody back in June of 2020, and we were saying, when was the book burning going to start? Because at the time, if you recall, HBO had banned Gone with the Wind, and they banned it because of the insensitive racial undertones, overtones, whatever you want to call that. To today, now what's happening? You guessed it. Now they're banning Dr. Seuss. So no more Cat in the Hat, no more Sam I Am, and no more Green Eggs and Ham. What does it matter if they ban Dr. Seuss? That's what happened in Soviet Russia. That's what's happening in China right now. That's why the increase in Chinese influence in this country is so concerning, because you're leading towards that authoritarian, and we'll use the word, I know it's one of those incendiary words, socialism, and the many tenets or tentacles of socialism that are reaching through education, reaching through entertainment, reaching through business in this country. So they're trying to control what you hear, and more importantly, what you don't hear or can't read. So this whole episode for our podcast is going to be about socialism. And to set the table, we put together a video about socialism. It's a quick 30-second video, but basically lays out that socialism has failed and socialism will always fail. Take a look. Socialism. Socialism then. Socialism now. The lessons of history are clear. Socialism is an experiment that has failed. It has always failed. It failed in the Soviet Union. It failed in China. It failed in Vietnam, in Cuba, and in Venezuela. In fact, it has failed anywhere and everywhere. And history is littered with the failure that is socialism. Socialism seduces you. Your life will be freer and happier under socialism. You will have no cares and there will be no need to work under socialism. Socialism's true goal? To seize political power, to take it from the people, and to give it to these people. The verdict of history is clear. Socialism, the big lie. This educational video was brought to you by the American Center for Education and Knowledge and paid for by people like you who care about the future of our democracy. Please help us continue our work educating the American public and consider supporting ACEK by making a tax-deductible donation at acekfund.org. And joining us today on Of the People, Leora Levy. And what a force she is. Business leader, philanthropist, political leader. She was one of the first female international commodity traders in the country. She was nominated by President Trump to be ambassador to Chile. Just a real force and a pleasure to have her with us on Of the People. Leora, thanks for joining us. Welcome to Of the People.
Thank you, Robert. It's really a pleasure to be with you today.
Well, I'm glad that you made the time. And I have to ask you, since it's in the news. So Texas just opened up.
Yes.
Are we on a roll? Is the country going to now open really quickly? Well, the red states?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but like every American, I certainly pray that we are opening up, that as more people are vaccinated and as we develop herd immunity, all states will be able to open up eventually.
From your mouth to God's ears. Let's hope so, because we've been closed as a country for far too long and at too much of a cost, I think, to the country.
Yes, and I'm happy to say I will be getting a vaccination, my first shot tomorrow.
Mazel tov. Nice. Yeah. Well, we just came back from Florida. It was nice to be amongst the land of the living, where people were at least reasonable with their precautions, right? So, what
I have told my friends now that vaccines are going to be more readily available in my state is that at some point this summer, I look forward to having a burn your mask bonfire party in my backyard.
Better than burning books, which is something we touched on in the opening, which seems like that's what they're doing now with the banning of Dr. Seuss. But look, what I really wanted to, thrilled that you're here, what I wanted to talk with you about, though, is first of all, you were nominated by President Trump to be the ambassador to Chile. Quite an honor, of course.
Yes.
Why? But, you were so accomplished in your career, business leader, political leader, philanthropist. And beyond the obvious that it's an honor to be nominated, why be an ambassador? Why go through, everything that you had to go through, which you want to talk about, but why?
Well, thank you very much for asking that question. Being an ambassador has been a dream of mine since childhood. I've always wanted, first of all, to serve this great country. I came here as a refugee from the communist revolution in Cuba. And I thank God every morning that I wake up in the United States of America as a free person with liberty and the right to speak and the right to believe as I choose. So my family in Cuba, my grandfather was one of the largest sugar producers in the world, and he was an American. He went to Cuba in 1920 to try to rescue some foreclosed sugar mills for what was then the First National City Bank of New York. And he built that into one of the major sugar companies in the world. As such, he was one of the leaders of the American expatriate community in Cuba. He had very good friendships and relationships with the US ambassador in Cuba. I grew up hearing stories about that. I grew up hearing stories about when he came to Washington to warn the State Department that Castro was a communist and they needed to do more to prevent him from taking over Cuba. He testified in Congress many times about US sugar policy long before Castro in the 40s and 50s. He was one of the people that would come and testify about US sugar policy toward Cuba. And so I grew up aspiring to be in that type of environment. When I was 11 and people would ask me, what do you want to do when you grow up? I knew I couldn't be president because I was born in Cuba, but I could be Secretary of State. And I was very inspired by Henry Kissinger and by Jeane Kirkpatrick and Daniel Patrick Moynihan. And so I would tell people I wanted to be Secretary of State. So when the opportunity to serve my country as an ambassador came along, I was thrilled to take it.
So you got the bug early, basically to serve. Look, I know that the process is a long, drawn-out process, and ultimately you were nominated. You were not approved for my reasons would be political reasons. So educate us on the process, and I really want to focus in on, because we're really focused sort of on the swamp, as to why you weren't approved. You are eminently qualified.
Thank you.
But yet you weren't approved. So help us, educate us on the process a little bit. Give us the Reader's Digest version.
I'll try.
And then let's go on from there as to sort of, why it was stalled, based on, I assume, the Senate's ability to advise and consent, which is a whole other can of worms we should open up and talk about at some point.
Yes. So the process is a very long one, long before you are ever announced as a nominee. There is about a year's worth of paperwork and vetting that takes place. And I'm not sure if in the past it has taken over a year, but it took approximately a year for me because I believe there was a lot of obstruction and delay to try to keep the president from having his nominees go forward. Especially with our financial disclosure forms, though every time we submitted them, they told us they wanted things reported one way. They would hold on to them for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks even, and then come back and say, oh no, we didn't want you, we changed our mind, we don't want you to report it this way, we want it that way. And that happened 5 times, just with financial.
So let me address. So basically it's like Charlie Brown moving the football, right? They're moving the goalpost all the time.
That's correct.
In the process. Is that normal?
I don't know. I've never done this before. I don't think so. When I've spoken, I have a lot of friends who served as ambassadors under prior administrations, both Republican and Democrat, and they said they never had to, they had to submit the paperwork, all the same forms, but they never had that experience.
So in your mind, was this sort of part of the resistance, anything to undermine Trump, basically?
Yes, I do think so.
So you start a year before the nomination. So it was a 3-year process, or was it a year and a year?
It was, the whole thing from start to finish was between 2.5 and 3 years. Yes. I started in around May of 2018 and my nomination died in December of 2020, December 31st, 2020.
So were you formally notified that it was just going to sort of die in committee? I assume it died in committee.
No, it did not. I had my hearing July 23rd. I had a hearing in person during COVID. They summoned me along with others on the panel to Washington, D.C., rather than doing it virtually as they had done the last couple of panels. They had us come in person, and I had my hearing and I was voted out of committee on July 29th. My nomination was what they call hotlined, in other words, kind of fast-tracked by the Republicans to get confirmed. And then Schumer, I think, along with Senator Menendez's urging, blocked all of us.
So why do you think you were blocked?
The big picture is the whole group of us were blocked because the Democrats didn't want to confirm President Trump's nominees. I think on a different level, Senator Menendez doesn't like my family's Cuba story, and he doesn't like my strong feelings against socialism.
So you were blocked for political reasons and to hurt the president.
Yes.
One has to ask ourselves whether that's politics as usual. It's a shame, but I did want to.
I don't think so. I think, in the past, presidents have been able to, are entitled to their nominees as long as the person hasn't committed any crimes or done anything egregious. I went through a very thorough security clearance and vetting process where they spoke to over 50 people who have known me throughout my life, including college roommates. And they went back, including past people who've worked with me, people with whom I've served on committees and boards.
So it sounds like, obviously you have an impeccable record. It just, to coin a phrase, it sounds like it sounds like you were borked, basically, but not in the judicial process, but in the confirmation process. That's what it sounds like. More swamp, more business as usual. So let's talk about socialism because Senator Menendez obviously would probably not like your views on socialism, given the fact that your family came here when you were young, you emigrated here. How did that impact you? I mean, obviously you were young, but your family fled Cuba with the onset of the Castro regime. How did that impact your growing up here? And what do you see here through your eyes, since it's so close to you and you and your family lived through it in Cuba?
Well, you have to realize I was 3 when we left. We literally left 2 weeks after my 3rd birthday. But I have vivid memories. I have vivid memories of our life in Cuba just before we left, because I remember the birthday party I had in my grandparents' garden, the piñata. I remember the house, the garden. I remember things like the Havana Yacht Club that we belonged to. I had another birthday party there, and I remember the swings that are the shape of boats and the mini wrought iron patio furniture for the children that are exactly the same as the adult furniture, just in miniature. And I remember the day we left, I remember having the most important things in my life at that point were my tricycle and my dog. And I was told I couldn't take my tricycle and we couldn't bring our dog. They now belong to some other Cuban child. And that was my first lesson in socialism. My father and my uncle stayed in Cuba and were not able to get out for about 6 months. And the reason was that they were wanted men. Castro came into their company.
Wait a minute, they were wanted men?
Wanted men, yes. They were enemies of the Cuban people.
Really?
Yes. As I said, my grandfather was a major sugar producer. My father and uncle started their own company. They had what was then the BVD franchise for Cuba, and they were in textiles. The day Castro marched into their company and nationalized it, told them they were no longer needed because the company now belonged to the Cuban people. My father had just collected a check from a client, from a customer, and it was in his shirt pocket. They left, they walked out, and he went to the bank and tried to cash the check, and they called the police. They somehow fled. They were called enemies of the Cuban people. They were hidden in the American embassy for a few days until the ambassador told them they had to leave because it was too dangerous for the embassy for them to stay there. They went to what was the Riviera Hotel, a very large, fancy hotel. My uncle was good friends with the manager. He put them in the suite that belonged to a famous American gangster. And
come on. So which American gangster?
I don't recall his name, but it was a well-known American mafioso. And
okay.
While Castro really was not afraid of the American army, he was afraid of the mafia. And they knew, the manager knew that the gangster wasn't there and wasn't coming to Cuba, and that Castro would never search his room.
So how did he get out?
The story that I know is that at some point they went to the airport. They were able to buy tickets with cash. They got online to get on a flight to Miami. As they were checked, they were pulled out of line and put into a room for further questioning. The plane, the engine started, the propellers started turning, and for reasons that they don't know and they'll never know, the man who was guarding them looked at his watch and said, "Oh, it's my lunchtime. I'm going to lunch. There's your plane." And he walked out. They opened the door. They ran on the tarmac. They got to the plane just before they pulled up the steps, and they made it out of Cuba. And they just showed up. And it was 6 months that my mother and my aunt with their little girls were alone in Miami, not knowing if their husbands were alive or dead or what had happened to them. There was no communication, no cell phones, no texts, no emails. They couldn't send a telegram that would have disclosed where they were. So,
given the amount of death among, the number of people that Castro put to
That's
death
right. He
that were
would just
political
take them and
prisoners?
shoot them and shoot them against the wall. It was
Right.
called El Parador.
Right. So I have to ask you, right, as probably the defining experience, certainly in your own life, if not your life, when you see what's happening now in America, right, with the progressive movement, with this whole cancel culture, which really does take its roots in socialism and more of what I would call a totalitarian
Absolutely.
control of
Marxism.
things. What do you see here based on those experiences that maybe the average American is just like canceling Dr. Seuss, not really putting much weight into? So what do you see that we don't?
Well, absolutely, the cancel culture is a very concerning sign, because that's what happens in totalitarian regimes. You are canceled. You are not permitted to speak your mind. In Cuba, it got to the point where every apartment building had spies and would spy on their neighbors. Children are taught to inform on their parents. Our children in public schools are being indoctrinated.
And that sounds a lot like what's going on here, that you're supposed to
That's right.
rat on someone, or I don't know what the right word is, but inform on someone,
That's
I guess,
correct.
who isn't wearing a mask or isn't getting vaccinated or who's doing the wrong thing, according to the government, of course.
That is correct. And it's really very frightening for me to see it. It's more frightening from my father, who's 90 years old and saw it happening in Cuba, and is now seeing similar signs here.
And I'll bet you he thought it would never come to America.
Exactly.
That's got to be
also,
so hard for him.
You have to realize they're trying to codify stifling our free speech into law. They're trying to codify rigging of elections into law. The provisions in HR 1 that just passed the Congress last night are frightening for the future of free and fair elections.
I agree. And it also means that Joe Manchin becomes the single most powerful senator, I suspect, in the Senate when HR 1, in whatever form, moves over to the Senate. So in closing out this little piece on socialism, reach down. What advice do you have for people based on your experience? What to watch out for? I mean, you've lived through it, you escaped it, you have firsthand experience. And for most people, socialism is a buzzword they read in a textbook, and they've never lived under it, and nor did they ever have to escape from it.
Right. Socialism to young people, oh, it sounds great. Free stuff. Everything's free. The government gives you everything you need, but you have nothing. You are dependent. They create dependency. There is no dignity in being given a handout. The greatest dignity you have is in earning something and working for it and earning it yourself. Free college sounds great, right? Except you will be paying for everybody else's college education for the rest of your life. And that's not the way to maintain a free society. So I would caution everybody who thinks socialism, oh, it's social, it's free, it's like a party. It's not. It's an all-encompassing system that just captures you in a net and stifles you and your children and your grandchildren forever. It is the best system for promoting freedom, prosperity, and individuality is free market capitalism combined with a democratic republic. That is the answer to create the best situation for each and every human being. President Trump said in one of his, I think it was one of his State of the Union addresses, no nation has done more to advance the human condition than the United States, and no people has done more to promote human progress than the citizens of our great nation. That is what we need, what we should aspire to, not free stuff for everyone. It doesn't work.
I think that speech was the July 4th speech in front of Mount Rushmore.
Oh, that was okay. Well,
I could be wrong.
I don't know. I think it might have. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He said it, and it's true no matter when he said it.
Good advice. And I want to thank you for that insight. Before I let you go, I have to ask you, since it's also topical. I know you're not a New Yorker, but you're close by New York.
I am, and I lived in New York for 10 years, and our family business is in New York. So I care very deeply what happens in New York. It affects me tremendously.
So this whole Me Too scandal, sexual harassment allegations against Governor Cuomo, who used to be during certainly the height of the pandemic, the golden child for the mainstream media, right? I mean, they couldn't put him on enough, and you know, all the accolades about what a terrific governor he is and what a crummy president we have, right? I mean, so other than being hoisted on his own petard, what do you make of all of that? And is there not rank hypocrisy? So even if he is forced to resign based on those allegations, what about all the deaths in the funeral homes? Freudian slip. In the nursing homes. In the nursing homes that were unaccounted for. I mean, what do you make of all of that? And is it not rank hypocrisy going on here?
It's absolute hypocrisy. And I can relate to it on so many levels because, well, fortunately, my elderly parents are living in their own apartment in Pennsylvania. They are not in an institution. So we've been able to keep them safe and isolated and they've now gotten their vaccines, so hopefully they'll be okay. But my heart goes out to the people who lost parents and aunts and uncles and siblings in what happened in the nursing homes. Common sense should have told Governor Cuomo and the other officials in New York that they should not send sick people into the most vulnerable communities. There were other alternatives, the Javits Center, the Mercy ship. It's a tragedy that didn't need to happen. When it comes to the sexual harassment, I relate to that on a very personal level. Being one of the only women traders in the company for which I worked, which was the largest commodity trading company in the world, they didn't know what to make of me because most of the women there were in a clerical secretarial role. There were only 5 women traders out of a company of about 11,000 people worldwide. And every day was a battle. Every day I had to prove myself. I dealt with the same kinds of things we're hearing that Governor Cuomo did. These men have such an ego, they can't conceive that a woman would not want their attention. My motto when I was working was, you can't climb ladders on your back. I was there to do a job. I was there to do a good job, and I expected to be rewarded and compensated fairly for it, which I never earned what my colleague who shared my office and did the exact same job earned. It was very unfair at that time, and there were no laws to protect me. There are laws now, and there are different standards today. And I think that Governor Cuomo and other people like him who prey on younger women who either work for them or are in their circles really have to face up to what they do and understand that it's unacceptable.
And isn't it really about power?
Yes, it is all about power.
Right.
Absolutely.
And when you look the other way, when power is used in that way, thank you, Bill Clinton, 1992 or 1990 to 1998 or whatever. No, what was he? Was 92 to 2000.
92 to 2000.
92 to 2000. It does set a precedent. Be very curious to see what happens in New York and whether or not Governor Cuomo is held to the same standards, being left of center, that all of us on the right of center are now being held to a same standard. I mean,
right.
My way of thinking, Leora, there's either one standard for all.
I agree.
Or there's no standards. So,
Yeah.
Leora, it has been a pleasure having you on Of the People. I cannot thank you enough for taking the time and especially sharing with us the journey from Cuba and away from socialism and towards freedom. I appreciate it so much. I hope you'll come back and join us again.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have been here and to have this discussion with you, and I would look forward to coming back again. Thank you for having me.
Understanding the threat that socialism poses to our way of life is critical. Now, I know the term is overused, and every time you hear the term now in the media, anywhere else, people roll their eyes back in their head and they don't listen and they don't think about it. But the threat is real. It's not coming from the Soviet Union. It's really coming from China. Cancel culture, Black Lives Matter are all part of this push for socialism. Now goes under the name of democratic socialism or whatever other nice title they're going to give it these days. But they're toppling statues, they're canceling writers, they're canceling professors, intellectual freedom, academic purity tests. That's what this is about. This is about the thought police on one level or another. The truth is, this isn't really a new religion. It's really an old religion made new. And I defy anybody to show me a country, show me a place where socialism has ever worked and not increased the abject misery of the general population anywhere and everywhere it's been tried. And the real truth is, how bad of a job have we done educating our young that they actually think that socialism might be an okay system for them to live under where everything is free? Just doesn't work like that. So I leave you with the following quote. And if you'll indulge me, because it's long, I'm going to have to read this one. You cannot legislate the poor into prosperity by legislating the wealthy out of it. Because what one person receives without working for, another person must work for without receiving. And the government cannot give anything to anybody that it doesn't first take from someone else. Because when half of the people get the idea that they do not have to work because the other half is going to provide for them and take care of them, and when the other half gets the idea that it does no good to work because everything they work for someone else is going to get, that, my dear friend, is the beginning of the end of any nation. You simply cannot multiply wealth by dividing. Adrian Rogers. As we go to close yet another podcast, remember that ACEK's mission is to help restore our most fundamental liberties back to the center of American life. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of assembly, without which none of the other freedoms we enjoy matter. We also reject a divided America that puts us into little boxes and pits us against each other. We reject it now, we reject it forever. Lincoln's quote about a house divided cannot stand comes to mind, and that's certainly appropriate now. The other thing to remember is that our goal really is not to affect public policy. Our goal is to move public opinion, is to move and motivate you to get involved, to stand up for what you believe in, and to fight back and to become part of ACEK and help fight back against what I call the progressive hordes. And to our friends on the left, the progressive left, what are you afraid of? What they're really afraid of, folks, is debate, and they're afraid of the sunshine. I want to thank you for listening to our latest podcast. Please subscribe to wherever you get your feed for Of the People so it automatically goes into your feed. And please like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, on Instagram. If you want to reach me directly, Robert C. at ACEK Fund, F-U-N-D, acekfund.org. Always happy to hear from everyone. I am Robert Chernin. We are ACEK, and we are of the people. Thank you so much for listening.
Stop the fire.